Alright, it's time for more Gorillagate. Brace yourself as we delve deeper into the web of intrigue surrounding Harambe's death at the hands of deep state globalists and the international communist conspiracy. This week, we're going to take a look at the ICC's members that we know of, as well as the parallels between Harambe's family and the Planet of the Apes franchise, and the missing link between primates and communism. In part 1, I outlined the 4 major contingencies of the international communist conspiracy as Russia, China, ISIS, and North Korea. Now, China and North Korea are a clear fit here. One has been devaluing its currency and taking our manufacturing jobs, while the other has been threatening us with nuclear strikes, and both have their exclusive trade deals and communist governments. But a lot of you are probably saying that Russia's no longer a communist country, asking, where does ISIS fit into all of this? Or why Fidel Castro was on the 2016 death toll if communists were behind last year's mess. Well, we'll start with the last one. During the final years of Castro's life and the Obama administration, relations between Cuba and America were on the rise. Fidel was letting the team down, and so they made an example of him. Kill Castro, back Trump, crisis averted. It's that simple. As for the other 2 items, they go back to the Rich Higgins memo stating that Islamists ally with cultural Marxists because as far back as the 1980s, they properly assessed that the left has a strong chance of reducing Western civilization to its benefit. Now, emphasis on the term cultural Marxists. I mean, sure, the Soviet Union has collapsed, but with ex-KGB officer Vladimir Putin in charge, I doubt the birthplace of communism has moved on as much as they would have us believe. And do you remember what was going on between Islamists and Marxists back in the 1980s? If not, then let's have a quick history lesson, shall we? Now, as you're all aware, the Soviet Union was stretched too thin to properly aid their new allies in the Middle East, so instead of giving them what little resources they had, they staged an invasion of Afghanistan so that the United States would arm and train the Taliban and help them rise to power. And we all know how well that worked out. Fast forward to the year 2001, where we all endured the tragedy known as the Planet of the Apes reboot, followed 2 months later by 9/11. I know a lot of you probably think I'm about to start on that tired conspiracy theory that it was an inside job. And no. It was committed by Al-Qaeda in cooperation with the Taliban. There were no smoke or mirrors present here. 2 actual planes were hijacked and collided with the World Trade Center, and around 3,000 people lost their lives. So have a little respect here. Furthermore, I've looked into this, and while it is true that jet fuel alone cannot melt steel beams, there are other things present that could, such as aluminium. Now, when the concrete has smashed apart, and the aluminium and everything else on that floor is molten or burning, the intense heat from that inferno combined with the weight of the higher levels that these beams are now the only things supporting, it is not unthinkable that they would start to bend. Alright, so it is possible for planes to bring down the Twin Towers. But there has also been a lot of talk about explosions in other parts of the buildings, and Tower 3 that was not hit but fell down anyway. And there is a much simpler solution. That was not the result of government agents planting explosives inside the buildings. They were communist infiltrators. Emphasis on the traitors. Alright? And here's a clip of Alex Jones demonstrating how the deep state globalists operate. Credit to Corn Dog with 2 Gs for putting it all together.
Scanning. control, manipulate scientific data, take over, blast, control world government, shut down infrastructure, ship everything to China. Just look at this person.
You see, these people operate in the shadows. Direct action is not in their MO. And given the mess they made with the Harambe assassination, do you really think they could pull off something this sophisticated? So, after 16 years, can we please finally put 9/11 to rest? It was not the United States government! It was the international communist conspiracy! Al-Qaeda provided the planes, while Russia, China, and North Korea made damn sure the towers fell. End of story. Or at least I wish it were. Because next thing you know, then President Barack Hussein Obama decided it was an appropriate and rational response to invade both Afghanistan and Iraq, even though they had nothing to do with it. And then, 4 months later, the real brains behind this operation, Harambe's mother Kayla, would die in the chlorine gas incident of January 2002, and the war of terror spiraled out of control. We just kept sending more and more troops, even after Bush declared mission accomplished in 2003. We just kept going until we destabilized the Middle East, broke everything, and got the locals all riled up and radicalized until BAM! Now we got ISIS to deal with, so great work, globalists. You played right into their filthy red hand. You see what kind of people we're dealing with here? We are stuck between the insidious communist threat and the globalists, who are so arrogant and infallible that they think they're in control, not realizing how easily manipulated they are into acting against their own interests time and time again. I mean, it's a wonder these people achieved power in the first place. How did that even happen? For crying out loud. And last year, it spoke volumes about how brainwashed their minions are. That they would rather shoot Harambe and cost themselves the election than question falsified orders. Alright? So that's what Rich Higgins was trying to tell us before they had him fired. Now, moving on, or rather back, because in part 1, I was unable to determine how these guerrillas played into the whole scheme of things. And now I have the answer to the missing link between primates and communism. The Russian hybridization experiments. Humansies, if you will. As far back as the 1920s, the Russians have been trying to create human-ape hybrids. The most notable were those carried out by Ilya Ivanovich Ivanov in 1929 with human sperm, ape volunteers, and vice versa. They were unsuccessful. However, it is likely that his work had been continued after his death in 1932, well into the 1960s. I mean, it is unclear where French author Pierre Boulez got his information from, but in 1963 he released a book titled Planet of the Apes, in an attempt to warn us about the correlation between hyper-intelligent primates and the fall of man. 5 years later, it became clear that this warning had not been heeded, and so the book became a movie in 1968, just 1 year after the alleged birth of Harambe's grandmother, Josephine. Now, isn't it convenient that she was born in the wild? I mean, no family history to look into. Furthermore, I found other sources saying that she was actually born in 1964, just 1 year after the original book was published. And it's just as likely that she wasn't born at all, but created in a Russian laboratory in 1964, and 1967 was the year she escaped and defected to the United States. But the parallels do not stop with Josephine and Kayla. I don't know how I missed this critical piece of information the first time around, but when I listed the casualties of the chlorine gas incident of 2002, I mentioned that Harambe not only lost his mother Kayla, but also his brother Makoko, his half-sister Uziri, and, wait for it, his half-brother Caesar, the one who would lead the uprising in the prequel trilogy. I mean, they realized that the message still wasn't getting through, so they made it perfectly clear in Rise of the Planet of the Apes that these gorillas were the result of human experimentation, and they even went as far as to start naming names. Now, when the sequel Dawn of the Planet of the Apes came out in 2014, just 1 year after Harambe's father Moja passed away, Harambe realized he was not safe in Gladys Porter Zoo and got himself a transfer to Cincinnati. But it was too little, too late. Now, Harambe and Caesar were very close, along with a third sibling called Nzinga, who is now the sole survivor of this triumvirate. Now, could Nzinga really be the next in line to lead the uprising? Let's take a look at where he is now. He currently resides in the Santa Barbara Zoo with his brother Bangori, and this is what their website has to say about him. Feel free to go and check this for yourself. He is named after a 16th century king of the Congo who fought against slavery. We're off to a great start here. He is the older and the dominant of the two brothers, so he's already a leader. And most telling of all, he gives keepers impatient grumbles in the mornings, otherwise he's a strong silent type. As you can see, Nzinga is used to getting his way and does not mess around. So keep a very close eye on this one, because if he does anything, or if anything happens to him, or he otherwise makes any other kind of headline, I will be reserving the right to tell you I told you so. And that concludes this week's installment of Alternative Factors. And we are now more than halfway through the data I've compiled on Gorillagate. What remains now are America's own hybridization experiments, the Bantu blunder, and the irresponsible press coverage from the fake news media that focused solely on the shooting of Harambe and attempted to sweep this whole horror show under the rug. I'm Connor O'Loughlin, and until next week, stay woke, people.
I'm here without Harambe, but he's still on my lonely mind. I think about Harambe, and I dream about him all the